So you said to me.
Good morning. My name is Tylena Goyo, and this is Rise and Thrive, Indigenous Arts, Cultures, and so Joyful Acts of Resistance. And I'm here today with artist George Alexander. George Alexander is an artist who has been captivating style. George Alexander is an artist who has a captivating style and creates thought-provoking paintings. The imagery that he uses comes from how he views the world as he wishes it to be. Often his work is seen with astronauts and animals. After he graduated from the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico with a BFA in 2015, George pursued a master's in fine arts at the Studio Art College International in Florence, Italy. With that experience, he gained sight on how another part of the world lives. This gave him deep perspectives on other cultures and made him appreciate his own culture even more. He graduated in 2019. His artwork is currently seen in Rainmaker Gallery in Bristol, UK, King Galleries in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Acavente. Did I pronounce that right?
That's better than what I could do.
Quattro Home Gallery in Prato, Italy. Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
All right. George is growing his painting techniques along with other mediums he's been exposed to, such as sculpture and jewelry. You can see George's work on Instagram, where you can find the latest of his paintings. George, it's so good to see you.
Hello.
And thank you for getting up. I know it's earlier where you are in Oklahoma, but I really appreciate you making the big effort to join us this morning.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's gonna be fun.
It is. Before we get into the artwork part of it, I know over this year you've been doing artist interviews yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask about that. What made you want to do that? You know, I guess we all jumped into this virtual world. And what was it like reaching out and talking to all these different artists about their work as an artist?
Well, I was living with three of my friends at that time. I just got back from Italy, and when the pandemic hit, me and my buddy were sitting around like just kind of spitballing ideas on what we could do. And my buddy Wes, he was like, "Why don't you do some podcast interviews?" I was like, "That's a good idea." And I was thinking, like, what is it that I could do that would be a little different than just interviewing artists or only have an artist perspective? Because typically we kind of get like the limelight when it comes to the markets or any sort of artist thing, but there's so many other people that are participating into the art market, such as curators, gallerists, what is the word? Art appraisers. Like, there's so many different like things that kind of go around the whole entire art market thing, or even art itself, you know. So I wanted to do an interview that or a podcast that kind of corresponded the whole entire experience, as opposed to just interviewing artists.
Mm-hmm. And so what were some highlights of people that you interviewed?
Well, I got to interview my buddy Scott. He's the native art appraiser, American native art appraiser. And, you know, we dove into the different ways that you have to appraise art. And, you know, it's not just like him going up there and be like, that looks to be about $500, or that's a $2 piece. Like, he does a lot of extensive research. And then just because you're trying to sell it, it depends on how you're trying to sell it. That kind of determines what and how much it's going to be, and what kind of like audience that you're looking for. Then I got to interview Charles King of King Galleries and sort of dive into the history of how he started his gallery and where it came from and everything. He's a good guy. Then I interviewed Cara Romero, and that was absolutely amazing. If you never met Cara, then like you're missing out, because she's a wonderful, wonderful person.
And she's an incredible photographer. And I think you said something like she's one of your favorite, or if not your favorite photographer.
Oh yeah, she's definitely my favorite photographer. I think that the way that she builds her photography is phenomenal. I'm still waking up, so like all my words
I
are
hear
like
you.
not here yet.
Yeah. So are you still doing the interviews?
Well, I'm gonna start back up here pretty soon. In fact, like I just bought a little microphone and a camera to really dive into the interviews. But I've been focusing a little bit in a different area for my art these last few months. So
let's talk about that.
uh,
I
okay,
would,
go ahead.
well, let's begin at the beginning.
All right.
When was the beginning? So I know you from being at IAIA and then your work from that point on. But before that, what inspired you to start painting?
Well, I started drawing, I think, just as a way to have something to do when I was a kid. Like most of us, we probably didn't grow up with a lot of things to do. I didn't grow up in a very rich family. I had 5 sisters. I had a brother, and we lived inside of a house that that a bunch of cats used to live in until we kicked them out. And so it was out in the middle of nowhere, this place called Mason. And my brother would be watching TV. My sisters were all way older than I, so most of them were already gone. The only one that I had that was in the house with me was my sister Winter. But she would be playing basketball or she'd be talking on the phone with her friends. So I was kind of just left on my own a lot, and I would just draw. I mean, I had a pencil and I had a paper, so I would start drawing. Then I would see like my older cousins drawing as well, and I think that I use that as a conduit to sort of like get to know them a little bit better. And so I would like imitate what they were drawing. And I fell in love with cartoons, and there was one particular cartoon that I wanted to draw like, and so I would draw it, and then they would do this thing to where they would show fan art on TV. And so I thought maybe if I got good enough that I could try to do this.
Yeah.
And so I never felt like I got good enough, and I just kept on doing it and doing it and doing it. And then I would look at my drawing and I would look at my cartoon character and I'd be like, no, it doesn't look like him. So then I just crumble it up, throw it away, and just do it again. Then whenever I was about 14, my parents passed away. And so I moved to Tulsa, which is one of the major cities here in Oklahoma. And so now it was just me and one of my sisters and one of her boyfriends that we were living with. And I would kind of use drawing as a way to like interact with people that I didn't know, especially when it came to the girls, because like I would draw their names like all nice, like, and like, hey, I drew your name, and then try to get to know them that way. Eventually I got into tattooing. It was like around the same time as like Miami Ink, and I thought it was real cool. So the first tattoo machine that I ever made was out of like those automatic toothbrushes that you turn on and off, and a guitar string and a mechanical pencil.
How did you know to do
YouTube.
that?
So then as I got older, I didn't know what I was going to do out of high school. I had an aunt that was a dean out at Haskell, and she told me about the school, the Institute of American Indian Arts, and she was like, go for one semester. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you just went one semester. It's not going to kill you. So I was like, okay, I'll check it out. I had no real ambition to actually be an artist. I just went because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to spend my entire life working at the casino, like where I thought my life would go. Um, so I go to the Institute of American Indian Arts, and my first 2 years, I didn't really take anything seriously. I just went and partied and did stupid stuff.
But you stayed.
I did because I enjoyed the atmosphere. I enjoyed the people that was there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that had it not been for I don't think I would have ever found my real self, like
Mm-hmm.
on who I am now. Because before that, I was just imitating what I thought I should be. And
Hang on to that thought. We're going to take a quick break, and then I want to explore all of that.
okay.
We're on Usula Media, Usula Radio. This is Rise and Thrive. We'll be back.
Take me out one more time is all you said to me. And I swore I heard a smile in your voice. I heard a smile. Over the phone is how you told me you still love me, and I'm still kicking myself. But what I said to you, I told you.
Okay, and we're back on Usula Media. We are talking to George Alexander, who is an artist. And we were just about to talk about your attending Institute of American Indian Arts, and you were in your second year and starting to get into the flow of your work and your art practice. So
yeah, I wasn't taking it seriously, and I started to one day, this guy named Nakona Burgess, he comes into my studio, and I have a couple of paintings here and there. Some are very abstract, others are kind of figurative. And he's looking around, and he's like, I hear a lot about you on this campus. Like, you're a good guy, and you actually have a lot of talent, but you definitely need to be focusing more on your academics as opposed to just partying. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And he's like, if you pull your head out of your ass, like, you would be a phenomenal artist. And so he's like, I'm going to take 3 of your paintings, and we're going to put them in a bank, and we'll just see what happens. And at that point in time, like, I didn't really think anything of it. They just kind of hung there. And so then he came back like maybe a month or two after that, and asked me if I would do this mural inside of was it Loretto Hotel with 2 other artists. And so at that point in time, I was like, yes. And then somehow, you reached out to me around this time to do Ifam. And that to me was like tremendous, because it made me feel like I actually had like real grit into this art world.
for the listeners, IFAM, it was an Indigenous art show that was at the rail yard in Santa Fe many years ago.
So I was ecstatic. And at that time, me and my buddy Dell, we were headed to Colorado to go to the Denver Art Museum. And like, I remember getting the phone call, and I thought that, like, I was like, dude, we might have to turn around. Like, this is awesome. And like, I was so excited. And so then, like, once that happened, I really started to like solidify into the idea that I was meant to be an artist. So I had another mentor. His name is Tony Abeda, and he's the closest thing that I ever had to a real dad. I mean, he's taught me so much stuff, like not just by being an artist, but like just being a really good human being. Without Tony, I don't even know where I would be. Anyway, he opened up his studio, his home, everything to me to pursue this passion that I had. And he, I don't even know, like I met him and we did this mentorship. I can't remember the name, but he mentored me and Dell around the same time as like Ifam had
So
started
it
to
was
pop
a
off.
formal mentorship, or he just took you both under his wing?
What was the question?
Was it a formal mentorship with?
Yeah. Yeah, it started out as formal. Like
Oh, okay.
it only was supposed to last like a year or two, but that was like 2013, and
Right.
like we're still doing this mentorship. It became like a family affair. Like uh so then because of my adolescence at first with the it took me a lot longer to graduate. I didn't graduate. I went there in 2010 and I didn't graduate until 2015. So about a year and a half of adolescence kind of messed me up a little bit. But I graduated, and at that point in time, I was kind of like up in the air of what it is that I was wanting to do. Um, I applied to a couple of fellowships and I didn't get a single one. And so my doubts started to like come back. And he was like, well, uh, why don't you think about maybe going to a master's program and seeing what happens there? And back in the 70s, not to age Tony, but he had gone to a school called the Studio Art College International out in Florence, Italy. And he was like, why don't you apply here? Don't worry about how much it's going to cost. You'll figure it out. Like, you're going to love it. This is going to be the best experience of your life. I was like, okay. So um, I get the application, I applied and pulled out whatever kind of money I could find to make this dream come true. And I got accepted. Then it was like a whole year long process of actually getting the paperwork together to go.
Mhm.
And yeah, that was very, very stressful because like, especially getting your student visa. I mean, I had no idea like what even a student visa was or anything. And we had to go all the way down to Houston and get it and then come all the way back to Oklahoma. And I missed one little line that was very important. It said that if your current passport was going to expire within a year, then you couldn't use that passport to get your student visa. And so I got denied, and I thought it was the end of the world. So, but luckily it wasn't. So then I go do it again and drive all the way back down to Houston, get my student visa, drive all the way back. And then at that same time was like the time for Indian market. And I go to Indian market and
Which
like,
which is the largest Native American art show in the
yeah,
world.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I go there and I have my passport in my back pocket. And
No, don't tell me what you're gonna say.
yeah,
Oh no, this is going
the
to be bad.
the day before I was supposed to leave, I lost my passport.
Come on, George.
Yeah, yeah.
No.
So like
Oh no.
it felt as if like the world was like going against me this entire time. And I was like, man, I'm not supposed to go to Italy. I am definitely just like, I'm supposed to stay here. Um,
Wow.
I,
And that time is so intense,
yeah,
and
yeah,
there's so much going on, and you're trying to do business, and there's a lot of people around, and then you're getting ready for school. I just can't even imagine what your mind was going through
yeah.
at that point.
Man, dude, somebody keeps calling me on my other phone. I don't know who it
Is it
is,
an
but
emergency?
what's that?
Is it an emergency?
No,
Get
no,
it? Okay.
no. You don't want me to get that phone.
All
That
right.
one's trouble.
Okay.
So anyway, um,
So
lost my
tell us.
passport.
I know you got there.
Yeah. Yeah, I got there. Found my passport about maybe 3 or 4 hours before I had to go to the airport.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. So it turns out it fell in my Uber driver's car. And I'm like, I called him just to see if maybe it was there. And yeah, turns out it was. He had to drive all the way to Albuquerque. Had I known that he was in Albuquerque, I would have just gone to go see him, but he didn't tell me that. So he drives all the way to Santa Fe to drop it off. Yeah. So then I was like, oh my God, thank you so much. And so then, the next day I hop on the airplane and I go to Italy. When I get there, I was actually supposed to I got there a week early, and it was just to sort of get acclimated to the time zone and get familiar with my surroundings.
And had you studied the language up to that point?
No. You would think that I would. You could see how that would be important, but no, I was too busy being an artist.
I'm charming enough. I'll be fine.
That's what I thought. So I was supposed to be staying at a friend of a friend's house. They had a like a dorm that they weren't staying in because they were in New York, and they were like, hey, you can just stay here. Here's the key. Boom, done. So when I get to the airport, like in Italy, it's not like you can hail down a taxi with your hand and motion them to come over. You got to call them and actually set up an appointment to get picked up. Didn't know this. There's also like a station that you can stop at, but that's it. You can't just like wave them down. So I'm trying to figure out how to get a taxi. I finally see the station, and I look at the guy. He looks at me, and he was like, "Parli Italiano?" I was like, no idea. And he was like, "Okay, where are you trying to go?" And I hand him the address, and so he types in the address, and we start driving. And like, it felt like he was taking me on the scenic route, but I have no idea, no clue.
Right.
We're going up this big old hill, and then he stops, and I look behind me, and I was like, man, dude, we're way out of town. He's like, this is where you're staying.
So it was.
Yeah. So then I get out of the taxi, and I grab my keys and I put it in the door, and it doesn't work. And I'm like, oh no. So I try the other key, it doesn't work. It was the wrong house.
How'd you figure that out?
Because the keys wasn't working. So I'm like, no. And I don't have a cell phone that works there.
Find out. Right. And you don't speak the language.
Don't speak the language. It's about 90 degrees outside. And I have on that really big hat that I wear. I have 3 suitcases because it has all my stuff in there. Right. And I'm like stranded out on the outskirts of town, like not even we're in Florence, but like not where the cool part is. So I look for the Duomo, and I'm like, I know that my school is somewhere around the Duomo. So if I just keep walking towards this big dome, maybe I could find somebody that has a cell phone or a taxi. And so as I'm walking, I find a cell phone store. And the first thing I was like, I don't even care how much it costs. I need a cell phone. I need to find my way to find a place to stay. And it's like getting to be dark at this point in time. And I find this lady that could speak English, and she helps me find my school. And my school calls another student that still lived there. Her name was Coco. And she allowed me to stay. Or no, we find the place that I'm supposed to stay at.
Okay.
So then you have to use 2 keys to get in. There's like the outside door, and then you walk up and you find all these different apartments, and then use that key to unlock your door. Now, it isn't like here in America where you have like a doorknob on the outside and you turn it. It's the key itself that opens the door. Well, I live out in Oklahoma. I've you don't really lock your doors here. You're just freaking friendly Tulsa, you
Uh-huh.
know? So I'm not really accustomed to leaving, like using keys that much. And so I get situated into my a place, and I was like, well, I guess I'll go walk around and see what's going on. And I left my keys in the apartment, and there's no way to unlock your door unless you got the
So this is
keys.
all the same. This is the same day. This is the night.
Same day.
Okay. All right. We're going to take a break and then we're going to hear how George got on the rest of the evening. This is Ursula Media, Rise and Thrive. We'll be back.
Take me out one more time is all you said to me. And I swore I heard a smile in your voice. I heard a smile over the phone is how you told me you still love me.
And we're back on Rise and Thrive. I'm here with George Alexander. And when we left on break, George was about to tell us another mishap, one mishap after another, getting to Italy. This is an amazing story. And I'm only laughing because I know you got out of it and that you had an incredible experience there.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to move on to that part. Okay, so you left your key in the apartment.
And I'm like, what the heck, man?
Like you can't get a break, right?
Could it get any worse?
Yeah.
So then I remembered this girl named Coco that I had met at Saatchi, which is Studio Art College International. And she's like, well, you can just, I have a loft. You can stay on the couch. It's not a big deal. Okay. And then they had reached one of my professors, and he allowed me to stay with him for the rest of the week until my apartment was ready. So his name was Felipe da Silva, and he was a really, really good professor. Anyway, finally things start to like, I start to get into the motion, into the groove of being a master student.
Yeah. And thanks to those people, right? Like that's what I find, especially there's these stories when you go abroad. I mean, there are horror stories too, but there's always these significant people in your life that you never expected to cross your path and wind up being these, like changing your life in a way because they're there for you, even though you don't even know them. And those kind of stories are always so amazing to me.
Yeah.
They set you on your path.
That's real. And I think like throughout this entire story of from where we are to right now, every single person that I've talked to that I've mentioned into this crazy story are the reason that I got to do art at all, because they're the ones that placed me into this path that I'm at now. From my aunt to Nakona to Tony, to the taxi driver that put me in the damn wrong address. Right. So yeah, like we get into the swing of things, and I have no real idea of like what it is that I was wanting to do out in Italy. I just like knew that I wanted to go. I had mentioned that I wanted to sort of dive into like colonialism and like look at the perspective of an Italian, since Columbus was Italian. I wanted to sort of dive into that side of what was the mindset of them coming to America and doing what they've done here. And if you talk to any Italian that's there, they absolutely hate this guy. Like they don't like anything that Columbus did or anything.
Do they acknowledge he's Italian? Because I've heard he's not Italian.
They do. Well, he is Italian. He's from Genoa.
Okay.
And they have a sculpture of him like chilling. Now, where he got all of his funding to go to America was from Spain, I think Spain or Portugal, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, they don't like this dude. And what I've really gathered as I was out there for 2 years, the thing that I really got out of the whole entire experience was how to appreciate what I have here back at home a lot more. And when I say this word, I don't necessarily mean like how indigenous people view this word, but my culture, like not like my indigenous culture alone, but like my entire culture. I I appreciate it a whole lot more, um, because being like separated for 2 years, not realizing what you really had, uh, and then coming back to it is a really tremendous feeling.
Kind of the idea of like we're Americans, and when we live here, we kind of say, well, we're indigenous, or you know,
Mhm.
I'm Chinese too, and I think about myself in that way, and I don't really always say, well, I'm an American person. And I can
Yeah,
imagine leaving, you really start to understand what being an American person is about, and not in the way when we live here it kind of has this weird
yeah,
negative connotation, because
mhm,
some people have hijacked that
yeah.
but it is our country too.
Well, I think that whenever I say like my entire culture, I simply mean just being a human being, and like uh understanding that at a whole other level, like disregarding any sort of label. Because whenever I was in Italy, we were doing the same exact stuff that I was doing here in America, except where we might eat a hamburger, they was eating pasta. And
So what do you mean by the culture then?
well, culture itself is just like knowledge within a society. uh I guess.
So you're saying that's not within the boundaries of country?
No, I don't think so at all. I
Mm.
don't think that like our
So it's just
country
every
itself
culture
is a
here.
man-made label. Like, does the sun still rise if we stop calling this place America? It has no hindrance
It's the way
to
to define things, I guess, right?
yeah. Like I don't know. I don't really like a whole lot of labels. Like, I think they put a hindrance on our existence here. Uh Labels and culture are two different things. I think that the label stops it from going to somewhere else, but I think that culture should have been fluid since day one. Now, that's just my opinion. Hate me, love me, I don't care. Uh,
Fluid
yeah,
meaning people should share and
absolutely. Yeah,
respect and learn how to work together to move
yeah.
society forward in a positive way
But
as human.
because of these social constructs that each society has, one felt better than the other, and it disregarded how another person lived, as opposed to experience how that other person lived. And so whenever I got to Italy, I experienced an entirely different way of life, that I loved, but I appreciated where it is that I came from. Because had I did not, if I didn't have this sort of experience here first, then I wouldn't know how that is different than what it is that I know. But I also learned a whole lot other cool stuff from
Yeah,
this culture that I
right,
got to bring back here.
right, right.
Um, and it really opened up my eyes. Like, I think anytime you ever go traveling, like
Mhm.
you have this feeling of like coexistence. Anytime that you leave home and you experience, even if it's just going to Kansas City, like
Yeah,
you you feel connected to something bigger than yourself.
right.
And I think that's what the trip really did for me. It was like, I don't know. I don't feel like I I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that. But
Well,
like,
so you use this leads us to your astronauts, because you
Hmm.
use space in a lot of your images.
Yeah.
And I remember we had this conversation maybe 7 years ago, where
Yeah.
you were starting to really study this, and you had said something like, do you know how small we are? And you broke it down for me. Like, I was like, oh, yeah, I know, we're like sand on a beach. You're like, no, not really, we're smaller than that. And you broke it down. And so
Yeah.
I think talking about culture and labels and definitions and boundaries and things like that, you know, that perspective of what you had already going into it because of your studies and your interest in
Mhm.
what's beyond, gives you an interesting perspective as you're walking around, even if you're in another country. So tell me about your interest in space, and let's talk about your paintings and how they're informed by that.
So whenever I was like at my last year, and I was really lost. Like,
Hmm.
I'd spent the last good portion of my life, a good 5 years at
Right.
II, and I didn't know what the next step was.
That
And
becomes a family, and then Santa Fe is so small, like that's an extended
yeah,
family. What else? What's next?
and I was searching to find like what it is that I wanted to paint for my senior show. And I had remembered this movie called Interstellar, and that movie blew me away. It was so good. And I also listened to this song by a band called My Morning Jacket, and it was a remix of the song. And this guy, he starts out as saying, "We all believe in something, even if we choose. There's nothing to believe." And I've never heard words like this in my life. I grew up inside of a small church my entire life, and for some reason that really started to get my brain kind of like going. And so I went on this like little mission to find out who was talking on the song. And to this day, I don't know. But Cara Romero had said that it could possibly be Alan Watts. And so I just YouTube Alan Watts to see who he is. And turns out it wasn't that guy that was on this thing, but I really dove into a lot of his recordings that are on YouTube. And it really helped the way that I shape or view the world today, which is like this coexisting, energetic kind of place that we're sort of still at our adolescent stage as human beings, trying to figure out what that actually means. So Interstellar happens, or the movie comes out, and it's this mission to find a new home for humanity because we completely tore it apart here due to our labels. Like, one society thought that they were better than the other, and they go to war, and it destroys our planet. Um, and there's a lot of astronauts that are in this movie. In fact, it's all about astronauts, but like space, futuristic kind of astronauts. So at this point in time, I haven't really put all these things together yet. They were just sort of like Alan Watts is over here, astronauts are over here, and I'm sort of like in the middle. I was looking for new things to paint. Like, this is going to sound kind of bad, but I don't mean it in a negative way. Uh, but everybody was painting stuff from an indigenous perspective.
Mhm.
And what I mean is, like, they were just basically taking their cultural heritage and painting it into a contemporary setting. And I wanted to try to not do that. So, but I didn't know what to paint. I had no idea, like, what could an indigenous person paint other than their cultural heritage. And so I was like, well, why don't I just paint an astronaut? See where that goes. And at this point in time, I had no idea that like Dan Dominga and uh dang, he was one of my professors. Well, they both did astronauts too, completely oblivious to this idea.
Hang on to that. We're going to take a break. This is Rise and Thrive on Usula Radio. We'll be back in a real quick couple of seconds.
Take me out one more time is all you said to me. And I swore I heard a smile in your voice. I heard a smile.
We're back on Usula Media, and I'm here with George Alexander. And you were just about to talk about how you got into painting astronauts, which these paintings are so phenomenal. I mean, you're still painting. I mean, I'm still seeing the work. I don't know if you're still doing it, but it's just the way they have evolved and the stories you tell and the colors and the detail and the movement. It's just all really so captivating. So go on.
So I'm looking for things to express who I am without sort of relying on the same motifs as an Indigenous person would. Just because I want to expand how to express who I am as George Alexander.
Right.
And I painted this astronaut, and I just did it. I didn't really have any sort of narrative behind it. And at that point in time, I was just pulling pictures off of Google and just painting them like the astronauts on Google. And so whenever we would have our critiques, Jim Rivera, he comes into my studio and he's looking at these astronauts and he says like, well, what do you think these are about? And I was like, no clue. And he's like, well, do you want my opinion? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, you're searching for something. You don't know who you are. And like, you're looking for something bigger. And I was like, holy shit, he's fucking right. Oh, I'm so sorry. And so then like, I started to think about all the stuff that I was like hearing from Alan Watts and like trying to understand what all this has to do with me. And Jim was absolutely right. Like I was looking for something like bigger than just myself, or like finding a real connection to this place. And so the first series of astronauts, I called it Searching for Histognomy, which is searching for God in my language. And then he asked me like, well, who's in the suit? And I said, well, it's a person that's just looking for a bigger meaning. And he was like, no, it's you. Like, these are self-portraits, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. And at that point in time, the only way that I could comprehend what a self-portrait was just by painting your face. Mm-hmm. And you would think that somebody with a BFA would understand that painting a self-portrait, it could be so many different ways. But again, I was not really focused into the academics. So that sort of like really changed the way that I view the astronaut. And so that really brought me down this journey of like, who is George Alexander? What is George Alexander? Who would I be if the world never told me that I was Native American? Who would I be if I never had a single label that was put on me? And then like I wonder what kind of identity would I have? Mm. Would I want to be Native American? Would I want to do something else? Like I don't know. These are just questions that pop into my head. Yeah. That's like the majority of my work is just trying to figure out who I would be if I was never told I was a certain thing. And so when I got into the master's program, uh, I wanted to do like this colonial work. You know, I've always had like this battle inside of my head of like wanting to do indigenous work, but not doing like
The expected.
the expected work. But how do you make the audience see that it's indigenous? You know, and I've struggled with this for a really long time. So I felt as if like doing this colonial work, trying to figure out like what that perspective would be, could bring this connection to my indigeneity. Uh, but then it felt so fake and like just forced that it didn't really feel authentic. So and I don't know why. It's not that I'm against that kind of work. It just wasn't
For you.
me.
Right.
And I really miss painting those astronauts. So I started to paint the astronaut again, and it felt really comfortable. And it felt as if that's what I needed to be doing. So I at that point in time I had already purchased the real helmet, and I brought it with me to Italy. So I started having just people put on the helmet and sitting in chairs and laying on couches. And I don't know, at this point, I'm just experimenting. I don't know what it means or anything. I'm just trying to make something happen. And so after the paintings were done, I started to observe like what they could mean, you know. And what I gathered from my observation was that it was a particular view of humanity that is waiting for humanity to finally realize that we are all just coexisting together, and that these labels aren't helping us. Again, not to misconstrue that it isn't culture. Culture is everything, but those labels are the things that are like stopping culture from being fluid.
They're creating boundaries.
Yeah. And so that began to really shape my thesis for my master's program.
We have about 3 minutes left, and I feel like we should have hours to go because there's so much more I want to
Is
talk
it already that time?
Yeah, it went so quickly. So I before we end, I'd love to just really quickly talk about where you are now, and if you can share your Instagram and all your socials where people can find you and see your beautiful work, that would be great.
Yeah. So you can follow me on Instagram at George Alexander the Second, real easy, and second spelled 2ND. Right now, I'm currently working on getting a small little clothing line up.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah, it's called Dead Hat, which we're not even there yet in the story, but you know, we'll get there. This is, I don't know if you guys can see it, but that's like the little logo there.
Cool.
And yeah, it should be launching here within the end of the month or within April.
So will people find it on Instagram also?
Yeah. Whenever I have it together, I'll launch the domain and get the handle up and everything so everybody can see it. Still painting. Yeah, everything is going good over here. I'm truly blessed.
Really wonderful. And you're selling prints sometimes, and you're where in your paintings are available mostly at galleries, or do you have them available?
I have some available that are with me right now. The galleries have a lot of the work, but for the most part, anything new is coming directly from me.
And so people can find you, the best way is through Instagram?
Yeah, right now, just Instagram. Once the clothing line kind of gets popped off, anything that has to deal with Dead Hat will go onto the Dead Hat website.
Okay. Well, it's been really nice seeing you and talking to you and hearing all the stories, because we haven't caught up in so long.
Yeah.
But I would definitely like to finish this conversation at some point.
Part 2 coming soon.
Part 2, would love it. Would love it. Well, this is it. This is Tyluna Goya on Rise and Thrive on Usula Media. And this has been a wonderful morning with George Alexander. Thank you for joining me and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Take me out one more time is all you said to me. And I swore I heard a smile in your voice, I heard a smile. Over the phone is how you told me you still love me, and I'm still kicking myself. But what I said to you, I told you I'll be over soon, I'll be over soon.